I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Brian D. Evans, CEO and founder of BDE Ventures. Brian, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Hey, Ashton, how's it going? Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm super excited to dive into crypto, more specifically the gaming side of it, and a little bit else. I know you get around the space, but I feel like to focus in on Web3 gaming for this discussion because the industry for gaming is just so big and much bigger than crypto. And there's a merging of these technologies happening, and it's not going to happen overnight, but there's definitely a lot of advancements happening in the industry. I know you're well on top of it, and I'm excited to get your expertise. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Yeah, when I first learned about Ethereum, I was a gamer growing up. I probably played way too many hours of World of Warcraft and Call of Duty and the typical games, right? And when I learned about Ethereum in 2014, pretty early on, I heard an analogy of Vitalik's backstory of coming from sort of the gaming world and then going on to build Ethereum. And I started to see all these similarities between games and smart contracts and Ethereum and blockchains in general. So it definitely piqued my curiosity, and I kind of dug down the rabbit hole of learning, what's possible sort of in this, how blockchain basically in gaming could combine. And then, games take a long time to build, right? So it took many, many years to see some, AAA quality games come out of the blockchain space. The first kind of games we saw were very basic. And then now we're starting to see more advanced games. They call it AAA basically refers to studio built games that's a Sony or somebody would build that kind of quality. So it's an exciting space for sure, and there's a lot of reasons why it just makes sense.
No, I completely agree, and I'm also a former gamer as well. And it's funny you mentioned World of Warcraft there. I think. I don't recall the exact story, but I remember, something happened to Vitalik Buterin's World of Warcraft character, and that was the reason that he actually built Ethereum. Was they took something from his character and he said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to build my own blockchain to change the entire world because of this." So that's hilarious.
Yeah, I believe it was like an analogy he gave about they nerfed his warlock spell or something, and he got pissed basically and went on to build Ethereum. But if you look at here's the thing. If you look at Ethereum, for instance, right, the smart contract itself, very similar to a game world, right, where it's got a set of rules and you can sort of do things within this world. Just the gold in the game, very much like Ether, and even the NFTs, very much like in-game assets. So there's all these similarities, and it just makes sense. If you think about here's something interesting. If you think about the evolution of games, right? This point in time where blockchains and ownership are relevant, there's a very specific reason for that on top of the technology just happening to sort of fit. We started when I was a kid, I played Mario Brothers, right? And that's called a closed loop game. You basically play for a while, you die, you lose, game over. You're going to go get some dinner or something, right? Then they said, well, let's just make the games go on, forever, right? And then this became like internet games, basically, and eventually games like Candy Crush and, games you could just kind of loop the levels basically forever. So people would just keep playing. And then that led to people buying things in games. And then they said, okay, well, let's go even further. Then you got these, massively MMORPG games and Call of Duties where you could play friends all over the world in these 3D environments that now look so realistic. And what happens is, and you said you were a Warcraft player as well, so you definitely get this part, as you invest so much time and energy into these games, right? So naturally, what would happen, and I noticed this as well, you can't do anything with your character if you stop playing. It's not allowed to sell your character, right? They'll just ban the account, and gold selling in these games is highly criticized and not supported for the most part. And so that's kind of where we come from, and it fits in perfectly with people investing so much time into these games that they want to own something, right? They say, well, because in the counter argument against Web3 gaming is nobody wants to own anything, and it's like, well, but no one's also out there saying, Blizzard should. I hope Blizzard makes extra 100 million this year. The players are definitely not saying that either, right? So it's just a natural evolution of player agency and people spending so much time customizing their characters, investing time into these games, that they want to own the assets. And we're seeing it, parts of Asia, for instance, you're seeing a huge adoption, Animoca Brands and others. There's even entire blockchain gaming alliances being formed with some of these big players. Even the big game studios. I've got friends, and we're building a Web3 game, and I've got friends from various Web3 game studios, and they all have plans. So in my view, what's going to happen, possibly, what could happen, one possibility, is you get a chat GTP effect, right? You get a smash hit breakout game come along that, gets millions of players overnight, and it uses the blockchain elements. Doesn't mean that it'll have, crypto in the app, for instance, because that's still blocked on game stores or app stores. But what'll happen is you get this smash hit game, and then all the studios will go, aha, now we got to make our move. We've got our Web3 plan ready, right? And then suddenly you'll see everyone sort of shift that direction. And they can still, I firmly believe that there's a model that everyone's happy, that the game studios can still make a lot of money. One thing they could do over time is work toward decentralization, right? Because I've played games before that they lose support from the developer, and then you can't play anymore, or it's hard to play, or the game stops working correctly, etc. So decentralization would be a great thing too to offer, to kind of move towards supporting blockchain. And of course, people, the original, people always joke, but it's true that the original NFTs are skins, right? People spend so much money on Fortnite skins and, Call of Duty skins for their guns and everything, the weapons in the games and the, even the characters themselves. People spend a lot of money on this. So it's all of this just leads to player agency. And then the idea of asset ownership is just a perfect transition to Web3 and to blockchains. And it's really great, because then it's encouraged to use marketplaces and swap items and trade and create an economy outside of the game that's not entirely reliant on the developer. Whereas in the Web2 world, it's highly discouraged. And, some games have little auction houses for in-game gold, but you can't take it outside the game. You can't really swap items across characters. And it doesn't mean that every single item has to be an NFT, right? You could have, and there's a concept called soulbound NFTs as well, that you could have these NFTs that are locked to your account. So that's also a possibility. So, basically, long story short, it's a perfect evolution for gaming.
I felt like there was this big pivot in the last, I don't know how many years now, maybe 5 to 8 years, where the game developers realized the potential of the in-game purchases. Before, even in these MMORPGs, it used to be like people didn't want to. It was sort of against like paying to get ahead, but once they realized the revenue potential of like, hey, sure, the game only costs a few dollars, but if you want to pay for some gold or for double experience, then all of a sudden people are just willing to do it, and all of a sudden they've spent 100 times more on in-game purchases than they have on the actual game itself. And I feel like that is the perfect evolution into the NFTs, where, hey, you're already buying skins. What if you can actually resell it in the future, or get the rare ones and then hold on to it, and actually you make a bunch of money while you're still enjoying the game?
Yeah, it's like this idea of play to win, right? It's an interesting double-edged sword with sort of this idea of this play to earn as well. People will, you can spend a lot of money in these games and get sort of this God mode character, right? And it's interesting because, I've done that, where I'll go into games and, okay, I'll buy all the upgrades, buy all the things, buy everything you can buy, and you actually get bored sometimes. So I think players really, I think at the core, there's different archetypes of game character. There's different archetypes of game players, right? So you have your group of people, and this is an interesting one. This is one counter argument against sort of the idea of crypto in games, for instance, that some category of players, play for escapism. They're unhappy with their regular life, or just need a break, or it's like a stress relief or whatever. And they kind of want to forget about the regular world, forget about their job, and just immerse themselves in this game. So the problem that play to earn, for instance, has had is that when you see those dollar signs and those tokens, you kind of are reminded, you're kind of brought out of the game reality and brought back into the real world, and go, oh yeah, I need to get a job, or it kind of takes you out of that reality. So there's still some things to fine tune. I think play to earn came off. It showed. My view is it showed what was possible, right, with Web3 gaming, and But in the end, it came across more gimmicky, I think, to a lot of outside people, and it left a bad taste to the mainstream about what crypto, blockchain, Web3 gaming is all about. But at least it showed that there's interest in it, that what is foreseeable in the future, and it's a viable space, basically. Yeah,
that's a great point, because last year, when Web3 gaming was taking the crypto world by storm, play to earn was sort of the main narrative, and we saw that with Axie Infinity and some of these other games where the point of the game was more just to make money. It wasn't really to actually play the game and have fun. And also, I feel like if companies work towards just a play to earn model, then they don't actually focus on the gameplay itself and the sustainability of the game. And if the game isn't sustainable, that's why some of the most successful games in the world that are open world, as you say, people want to, it never ends, but people keep playing them. And you mentioned there, if you get all the good stuff and then you sort of get bored with the game, then like you've lost it from the developers. You want to keep playing the game. They want you to play forever, hopefully. Yeah. But there has to be that balance of like, you're earning, but the point is not to earn. The point is to have fun and enjoy the game. But also, if you're earning a small amount on the side, whatever is kind of fair, where do you find that balance in these games that are going to come out?
Yeah, it's a tough topic because game economies are immensely complicated. And especially when you introduce a lot of players to a game, things can change. You need to kind of be on top of it. It's kind of like running a country's economy, right? You got to kind of account for inflation and discovery, the metrics of the math behind, how rare certain items are. It's very complicated. It's different than building. It's a different beast altogether than just the mechanics of a game of go in and attack and fight with your swords or something, right? The economies can be very complicated. And I think that is a challenge because you're basically, with Web3, you're basically saying, hey, let's focus more on these economies. So you need a lot of smart, and we're starting to see it. We're starting to see really smart people coming into the space and, showing what can be done. So I think we're getting there. I just think games take a long time to build, especially when you introduce Web3 and making things a little bit more complex with the economies. It's going to take some time. We're working on a game as well, and it is very complicated to build a high quality game and to get the economies right, and to make kind of, keep everyone happy, so to speak. So it's a tough one, but I think over time we're seeing more and more players push towards, you're seeing your Alluviums, your Star Atlases. We were talking about Shrapnel before the show, and many others kind of coming. Big Time's another one that are building these, near AAA quality games, let's call it, or maybe AAA quality-ish in some cases, games. And so we're getting there. We're getting there. But it's a category that I'm focusing on very heavily, and I'm investing into it. I'm getting involved, helping others build games, and I really think that this is one of the best use cases of blockchain technology out there, and for digital assets as a whole. And I will not be surprised if we see a massive, gaming bull run due to some element of blockchain. I don't think the code has been completely cracked yet. To be honest, I think we're still getting there in terms of figuring out sort of the perfect balance of what creates that ChatGPT effect of some smash hit game that uses some element of blockchain and Web3. Is it just the NFTs? Is it something with tokens? Is it the economics? Is it, just the idea of ownership? Is it all of the above? Is it just having a really good game with those? As I mentioned before, we're still dealing with some problems. For instance, the iOS App Store, you can't have an app on there that has crypto in it, basically, right? Or NFTs, I believe, as well. So we're still dealing with some of those centralization problems. But sooner or later, we're going to have our Steam of Web3, right? There's a few companies trying to do it, where you're going to have decentralized or sort of separate Web3 native, operating systems or apps or programs where you can run the games off of and build on top of. And I think that's the core of the issue, is that all these games are basically having to start from scratch and build everything. But, it'll be easier when some of the more infrastructure level services are there, and then games can kind of build on top of it, build their cool game, and then they have support around the tokens or the NFTs or whatever aspect that they're integrating. And I think also lingo is a problem too. It's like, NFTs got demolished in the last cycle, and the bear market, just for, unfortunately, just the nature of a bear market of prices going down, and kind of got a bad name, and scams and things that are out there. But end of the day, that's just terminology. The technology itself is brilliant, and yeah, again, just a matter of time. It's coming though, that's for sure.
I agree, and that's a great point that you brought up about the having the Apple App Store sort of blocking it right now, but also the fact that there's, for the hardcore gamers and more full built-out games, there's the Steam store, there's like Epic Games, and these other platforms that for people that are really into gaming, they're not going to the App Store. Maybe there's a small mobile version of the game, but they're going to where the gaming platforms are. And I feel like building a community and a platform around Web3 focused games could bring more attention to when there actually is a great game, have that on the Web3 platform, and then have all of the other games and sort of build your own profile on that. I feel like that's something that needs to be coming in the near future.
Yeah, and I think, in addition to that too, I think the entertainment category overall is going to drive adoption of gaming, and gaming is going to help entertainment. The film space, for instance, there's a lot of people building, models around integrating films with NFTs and things like that. A good friend of mine, Rick Dugdale, made the first NFT movie with Anthony Hopkins. Did very well. They launched NFTs around it and building platforms, etc. And I think the more we see in entertainment as a whole, we'll see that supporting game and helping with gaming, because there's a lot of builders. Even the Epic Games of the world, they're all working on strategies around this. Just like Hollywood, like I mentioned with film, they're working on strategies around this, and it's kind of just sitting there in their back pocket, right, waiting for the right time. Guaranteed, they're all doing it. So yeah, again, just a matter of time, and it's kind of a first mover thing. It's you're not going to see all the studios go, until you see one sort of thing. But interesting analogy is the Bitcoin ETFs that are potentially happening soon, or in the works for a while now. They could be coming out. At first it was like one or two players were trying to do it, and then they kind of were having a hard time. And then you start hearing of dozens of players trying to do it. Then the market starts pricing in 80%, 70%, 90%, possibility of these ETFs happening. And I think that FOMO of ETFs is very analogous of what's going to happen with gaming. Again, if I had to guess, that you're going to start seeing more and more players. Then they're all going to be looking around. Okay, is Blizzard doing this? Is Sony doing this? Is so-and-so doing this? And they're all going to start getting their strategies ready when they feel like the others are doing the same. But again, I always go back to the idea of there's probably going to be some smash hit game that just really makes it obvious, like the ChatGPT effect of why this is so relevant. And I think it starts with gamers, and I think there's an education element. I really try to do my part in educating gamers too, of like, hey, all that money you spent on those skins, like what if you could own it? And potentially, not that it's all about money, but wouldn't it be cool to own it, like a baseball card? I grew up with baseball cards and other collectibles, and I collect things even to this day, on a small scale. So there's that cool element of collecting, and being able to see it in a wallet or see it on a market, in some account somewhere. And that's the other point, right? I think the thing that's scary, and I remember the Gala Games founders or one of the main guys talking about this, and they said one of the biggest problems they have is that people lose their seed phrase and get locked out of their accounts. So I think on a technological level, we're still dealing with the fact that the technology is there, but it's a little too hard for people. And Vitalik and others have been trying to come up with solutions to storing keys better and having backup methods using your friends and things like that. And I think for gaming, especially because and most people don't know this, but gaming is bigger than film, TV, and music combined revenue-wise. It's a crazy, crazy large industry. I think that the technology needs to be kind of, I don't want to say dumbed down, but it almost needs to be safer somehow to use. So if you are going to, and maybe the answer is a Web 2.5 kind of world, right? Where we don't all have to necessarily, have wallets and keep our seed phrases, where you can have, two-factor authentication is maybe enough, and it can be stored, semi-centralized, even though I hate to say that, but I think that's at least a transition where you can use the Web3 elements, the NFTs and the tokens, just to get a taste. And then if you want to take them out and put them in a wallet, you can, but you're not forced to. And it's not like a technological barrier where you have to like learn all this new stuff and work towards it. So I think the games that figure out whatever, I don't even know the solution, whatever that solution is to making that simpler and less likely that you're going to lose your assets since you're kind of becoming your own custodian of those assets. Once the code is cracked on that, that solves a lot of the problems. And then therefore it's going to be an easier transition for sort of the Web2 game players to come over fully to Web3 because they're going to not be so worried about losing the assets or having them hacked or stolen or whatever. So I think that's a big factor as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. And I feel like it should be something that's easy to crack. They just have to fine tune it. For example, if you had your World of Warcraft character, you log in and obviously your character is already, your character could be an NFT itself. You're going to log into the game and it'll be there. Your items will be in your pack in your game. And then when you do some kind of safe transition to an external marketplace, it's almost like trading on Uniswap. You could just authorize certain NFTs to transfer them and provide value and hopefully not have to, open the game and the first thing you do before you get to choose your character is write down all these words and get a lecture about financial history and how you should protect your own assets. There should be, I feel like, there needs to be some kind of semi-centralized protection of, hey, these assets are inside this game. We're going to help you take care of them.
Yeah. And it comes back to infrastructure, right? It's like the infrastructure is still, it's there for the technological user, but I think UI UX needs to improve in many cases to make things simpler and just the methods themselves of. And look, I'm not even suggesting just to keep it centralized necessarily to have access to those assets. I'm thinking, there's got to be a simpler solution. I think Vitalik's talked about the idea before I mentioned about sharing basically as a backup method. If you lose your keys, I could elect you and two others or something to be my sort of backups that combined can get me back into my wallet. So there's got to be there's got to be some more options. I just think the technology on that side has to catch up for the oncoming. And look, we're heading back into a big bull run. Maybe NFTs in the next year or two will get a real new all-time highs and real new interest in NFTs and then which will inevitably and is driving interest to Web3 gaming because that's a digital asset ownership. I think is a huge component of it. And I think, on the note of asset ownership, I think as we see real world assets go on chain with owning those assets, I think that's going to, again, drive interest back to Web3 gaming because people are going to keep going, oh, yeah, well, if we have our house deed on the chain, should we just have our Fortnite skins on there as well? So I think it just makes a lot of sense. Like I mentioned, I'm also very excited about the entertainment category as a whole. I think there's amazing things happening. A part of some of them, there's amazing things happening in the film space. And again, it's the same story. Everyone's kind of trying to figure this Web 2.5 kind of world out of like, how do we get these in people's hands, but not make it so hard yet? And in an investment sense, those are the kinds of things I'm personally looking at for investments and, angel investments and even some VC stuff we're working on. Is that infrastructure level of how do we, let's assume that Web3 gaming in 5 years is a massive thing, right? What are the tools? How do we reverse engineer? What are the tools that are needed to kind of get there, right? And there are tools that are definitely needed to get there. Don't get me wrong; it's not sort of 100% figured out at this stage, but it'll happen. People build these tools, and so whoever kind of figures. And again, I think that's probably taking a note out of Gala's book. I'm sure the Blizzards of the world are going, oh, look at Gala. They're having this. I love Gala, but they're having these problems with like people losing their seed phrases, for instance, right? And that's not a problem, isolated to Gala. By the way, that's not this is like every game, every set of Web3 games that have full control, full self custody, right? And it's great from like a authenticity standpoint of blockchain native users that we want self custody and decentralization and all this self sovereignty, but for the average person coming in, it's like, it just says, oh yeah, cool, I like the idea of this, but they don't know much about this Web3 world. It's definitely still a challenge, but I'm very bullish about the future of this category overall.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the future, as you mentioned at the beginning, if you're looking to build a AAA game, that's not something that can be done in even less than a year, a few years. But we know that there's more than a few of them in the works right now that are from sort of Web3 native game studios. And I think there's a few that are already out that are sort of, they went through the initial run of when people first heard about Web3 and then sort of lost traction, but I'm sure they're not giving up. They're in a multi-year vision. And then, as you mentioned, there's also the traditional studios that are like, they're obviously doing something, but they're waiting for that ChatGPT moment to pull the trigger. What do you think is going to happen as we move into 2024 or maybe 2025, something big? Is it just the release of more games to experiment with the next stages, or something else in advancements of pushing this actual Web3 gaming industry forward?
I think it's a combination. I think it's everything we've said in this conversation. Really, it's the best quality games. People were fed up with kind of low quality games coming into Web3, and there was a reason for it. It wasn't just because they wanted to build low quality games. It was because, as we said, it takes a long time to build AAA level games, right? And it's very expensive. So it's a combination of building really high quality games. It's the technological aspect of just simply having the right tools to support, a World of Warcraft size player base that's not going to lose their keys, for instance. That's also a big part of it. And then, it's the awareness, it's the education of people, like us having these conversations of why it's so beneficial to own these assets. And I think people naturally know this. And I think as the other things come into place that makes it technologically easier, and you do see one or two smash hit games come out with millions of players sort of overnight, like a ChatGPT. I think you'll see other companies get on this more. So I think 2024, 2025 is going to be very strong for Web3 gaming. We're in the last 6 months, it's been it kind of died down, and it's been sort of creeping back up again in terms of interest in development. So I think it's the best time. I think if you're building games right now, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot not to be looking at Web3 elements to put into the game. I think it's just the obvious future. I think people are going to be looking back in many years and going, wow, these Web2 games were the DVDs of the world, and Web3 is digital, right? So it's I think we're going to have that Netflix moment where it's people are looking back on, wow, I can't believe we hung on to that for 20 years before we sort of moved over to the new model. It's really just the same archetypal story, so to speak, of the old guard hanging on to what they have. And no offense, it's working for them, right? It's working. They're making a lot of games are doing very well. So they don't have a lot of incentive to take the risk, so to speak, is probably how they see it, is more of a risk. So that's, again, goes back to my theory of we need that ChatGPT moment.
Mm-hmm. Great insights, Brian. And for people that want to follow along with updates in the gaming industry and your insights on the web and the game also that I know you have in the works, is there any place that people can go to learn more about that stuff?
Yeah, just any social platform. I'm Brian D. Evans on all of them, X and Instagram and that kind of thing. So you can follow me there and stay in the loop.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for your insights into gaming and everything, Brian. All the best with following along in this space. We should definitely follow up in the near future because I know there will be more updates to the Web3 gaming space.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy to chat anytime.